So on this new episode of Jersey Shore in the Poconos, we start off with Angelina and Chris coming to the Poconos resort, and they say it looks empty. There's no one around, and they feel like this is kind of spooky. The people that are already there are discussing how they're going to approach this problem of photographs of Angelina going to visit some man in her old neighborhood, and it shows pictures of her throwing chicken tenders on the ground or something, and they're upset because Chris is coming with Angelina to the Poconos resort. Well, I feel that's kind of silly because everybody else is bringing their spouse, and some people are going to even be bringing their kids. So it would be really odd for Angelina to show up alone, even though she has been having some problems with her husband, Chris. But you would expect her to bring Chris because everyone at the resort is going to have their spouse or significant other, except for Vinny, and she can't keep getting hooked up looking like a single, meeting with Vinny on these vacation spots. So for her to bring Chris, totally normal, and I don't see what the anxiety is by the group. Then Jenny comes to the resort, and she comes with Zach, and she brings her 2 kids along. So she puts the kids to bed, and then she goes to meet the rest of the group in a different room at the resort. I assume that the show has paid for babysitters so that so that Jenny and Zach can leave and go meet with the group. But anyway, so they meet with the group, and they surprise the group by saying that they're now engaged. And Jenny shows the group the ring, and everybody screams with glee as they hear the news. Then Chris and Angelina come down to meet with the gang, and they're all having dinner with the crew. And when Angelina and Chris walk in, everybody becomes very silent, and this atmosphere becomes very awkward. And so Angelina says, well, I think they're feeling it's unusual because they didn't expect me to bring Chris to the spa. And so I think that's kind of unwelcoming in that he is her husband, even if they're having a spat, and they should have been warm and open towards Chris coming and not try to shut him out. He already feels kind of shut out because he's not part of the original crew, and I think their clamming up as soon as they enter the room is a sign of hostility and being unwelcome towards them. After Angelina and Chris sit down, Vinny wants to take center stage, and he starts making jokes, and you can tell that Chris is feeling very uncomfortable. He's crossing his arms, he's putting his hands on the back top of his head. He seems to be moving about in his chair more so than one would anticipate, and I think Vinny's jokes are not going well with Chris, and Angelina says, Vinny, I'm not taking your jokes today. Then Angelina takes the bait, and she feeds into Vinny's joking, and she's saying she's going to throw her wine at Vinny, and they keep going on and on, back and forth, laughing, and Chris is looking at her as if to say, what in the world is going on, and why is all of this conversation between you and Vinny occurring? So I just wish they would be more welcoming, Chris, and a little bit mature of what's expected from a married couple. Then Angelina actually throws her wine at Vinny. Vinny gets some of the wine on him. He jumps up. Some of the other cast members jump up and start oohing and ahhing, and the remaining cast members are saying, oh my gosh, what's she going to do when we start talking about the investigation about her and the pictures? Then Mike decides he and Lauren want to go back to their room and go to bed, especially since the wine throwing by Angelina at Vinny, and they decide secretly that bringing up the investigation about the pictures is probably not a good thing to bring up at all tonight, and they'll do it later. Paulie D is confused. He says, I thought we were having an investigation, but instead the whole thing just kind of disintegrated, and it was the disintegration, I think he said, and not the investigation tonight. Everybody gets on the shuttle buses, and they go back to their rooms. The next morning, after Angelina and Chris get up, Angelina says, the orders for today are, if anybody messes with me, you have to defend your wife. And Chris agrees. The rest of the crew are discussing why they felt they needed to leave early after the wine was thrown, and Vinny is upset because he felt like he and Ronnie were left with Angelina after Jenny and the others had gotten on the bus to go back to their rooms, and he didn't like the abandonment. But, of course, he caused all the problems, so he should be there and face the discomfort of being with the person that he had just insulted. Then we see Dina on her way coming up to the spa, and she is with Chris, her husband, and her mother is also in the car, and I guess that's for child care. And Dina's saying how wonderful the outdoors looks, and she enjoys looking at the snow, and she says this is how she likes to enjoy the wilderness inside the car in the comfort of the exclusion from the atmosphere, from the cold. And meanwhile, the others are complaining that it is so cold that it feels like it's 1 degree outside. After their morning exercise routine, the guys decide that Ronnie should be the one to talk to Angelina about the videos and so forth that they have, and to discuss the implications with her. Next we see Jenny telling Dina that Angelina's there and she did bring Chris. Dina says Chris is with her. And then they discuss how this whole trip is going to go south because they didn't expect Angelina to bring Chris. Again, I don't understand why they wouldn't expect her to bring Chris. Dina even brought her mother and her kids, and Jenny brought her kids, and so everybody's here. Paulie brought his girlfriend. Why in the world wouldn't Angelina bring her husband? I don't understand what the surprise was, and they should have been prepared for Angelina to bring her husband. As the group gathers to talk, Paulie D and Nikki come in, and Nikki is wearing a turtleneck, but the turtleneck is so unusual looking and so high up to her chin that it looks like she's wearing a neck brace. And so everybody starts laughing, remembering when Mike was wearing a neck brace after he rammed his head into the wall during their Italy trip. Jenny breaks the news to Dina and Chris that she and Zach are engaged. Dina's very happy, and then we see Vinny looking at what can you do in the Poconos, and there are many activities, but most of them seem to be activities for couples, and Vinny says, I feel like I'm on a weird couples trip. See, that would have been the problem. Had Angelina not come with Chris, Vinny and Angelina would have been hooked up at all of these couples activities, and that wouldn't have been right. So it was proper for Angelina to bring Chris, and they're beginning to realize that the Poconos really is a place for couples. And that's true. When the Poconos is discussed in Pennsylvania, it's usually always discussed as a place for a honeymoon or some other romantic event, a couple's retreat or something like that. But it's usually not a place where singles go and hang out. Vinny wants to hang out at a strip club or go to a pool party in Vegas or get drunk. And none of these activities are activities that you can do in the Poconos. So Vinny is feeling really left out as to what he can do and have fun in the Poconos. The group all goes to breakfast, and Lauren at the table recalls that 17 years ago, Mike and she, with their families, went to the Poconos, and she created a photo album at that time. And she said she saved it, and she brought the photo album with her. So she passes out the pictures, and everybody gets to see what they were like 17 years ago when they first visited the Poconos. Of course, Vinny is disillusioned because he thought the dinner they had when Nikki was introduced to the group was so boring that he fell out in hysterics. I think it was actually jealousy at Nikki being a part of the group, but he fell out in hysterics, and he said it was because they were talking about all kinds of domestic things like cooking and recipes and so forth. He says now here he is in the Poconos with these people, everybody's a couple, and now they're passing out photo albums. He said, how much more boring can that be? And again, he's feeling left out of the group. So Mike, Ronnie, and Paulie walk away from the table, and they discuss that while the group is bowling, that they're going to use that as a diversion, get Angelina away from the group, show her the videos, and then Mike's going to come in and talk about the different aspects of the videos. So they decide to leave the breakfast table, and Lauren suggests the whole group goes bowling. And they go over to the bowling alley, and Vinny says, wow, bowling, it reminds me of Paulie's basement. And everybody seems to be having a good time bowling, and they're eating again. So there's chicken and sandwiches and sodas. This group is going to gain a lot of weight. Then Mike says it's time to perform the extraction, which means they're going to extract Angelina from the bowling alley. They're going to take her into a separate room. They're going to talk about the videos. Ronnie's going to do that, and then Mike is going to come in to that same room with the videos. Now, if you're a couple, you know when your partner is missing. So I would imagine Chris, the minute Angelina disappears, is going to know that she's missing and wonder where she is. He's also going to notice that a couple of the males are also missing. So I don't think this is a good idea as far as secrecy, because it's going to be an instantaneous notice by Chris. But anyway, Angelina is in the other room with Ronnie, and he's saying that the videos are bad, and Angelina is saying, but there's nothing on the videos. So it's unclear, but Mike shows Angelina the videos that he's concerned about. Angelina says, well, you see me screaming and yelling, but that's me. I'm Angelina. That's what I do. And then Mike says something about he's running down the stairs and you're chasing them, and they both kind of give a little giggle. Mike says that on the video, Angelina is screaming, I'm going to key your car, and some other things. And Angelina is rebutting it, saying that there's a whole lot more going on than what you see on that video. Angelina says that the person on the video is one of her friends, a person that Chris also knows. And then they show a picture of Chris looking around for Angelina, gets up and walks off, wondering, of course, where she is. And what makes it even more dramatic is everybody sitting away from Chris, whispering about Chris. So, I mean, he's going to feel even more and more awkward about what's going on. And I think it really makes Chris feel very uncomfortable and excluded from the group to have them talking and whispering about him, and also not involving him in group chats. Then we go back to Mike and Angelina. Mike saying, hey, if you have a side piece, or if you have a boyfriend, or you're a swinger, that's one thing, but, it has to be cleared up. And then Angelina says, this girl who's doing this is a stalker, And why even give her all this publicity and reward her for stalking me like this? Angelina says when Jenny found out the videos were there, she should have texted Angelina and told her that she had found out about some videos, and they could have resolved the whole issue without a big hubbub, and it could have remained very quiet. She says, in the end, it's my marriage. My husband and I are together now, and we're trying to work it out. And so Mike, in the end, says, okay, and gives Angelina a hug. When Mike and Ronnie finish the discussion with Angelina, they leave the room, and when they come back out to the main bowling room, there's a big, hi, how are you, and arms up and hugs and everything. So it's very obvious that they had been missing and that something had gone on with Angelina. And, of course, Chris is very confused and, again, feeling left out. And then everybody is going around the room in the bowling alley discussing Angelina and Chris, the tapes and the conversation they had, and so forth. And again, you can see everybody huddling together, and no one is approaching Chris with any of this conversation. So I imagine Chris is feeling very awkward as to what happened with Angelina and why is everybody making all of this discussion and avoiding him. They're even including Zach in these conversations, and Zach really has no knowledge of what's going on. He's a new member, and it would be very strange for them to be whispering with Zach and leaving out Chris. Finally, Mike says, look, it's their marriage, they're handling it, and they know what's going on, and it's more or less, let's let them work it out.